Hey, what's up guys? Yeah, today we're gonna be doing a good old One Piece tier list. Yeah, I don't know why I did that. Anyway, yeah, I don't think I need to explain what a tier list is, but we're gonna be taking all the arcs from the story and ranking them on this list here, D being the worst, SS being the best, and seeing which one is the best one, obviously. And I thought that this was the perfect opportunity to do this because Egghead just ended, so let's see how it stacks to the rest of the arcs. But here's the catch with this tier list. Everything here is objective. Everything you see is facts. Because unlike you guys, I'm right. So there's no biases, there's no opinions here. Everything is just how it is. So yeah, let's get into it. Alrighty, so first up, we have Romance Dawn. I think this arc is really good for what it is. It's very short and concise, but it gets the point across really well. The highlight is obviously Luffy and Shanks' flashback where he hands him off the Straw Hat. Still one of the most iconic moments in the series and just in shonen in general. It also introduces us to Luffy and we get to know his character basically immediately, and he doesn't really change throughout the series all that much, so you kind of know what you're in for. So it's just a great way to set the foundation for the series. The stuff with Zoro wasn't as interesting, but other than that, I think it was a phenomenal introduction to the story. So because of that, I can't give it anything less than an A tier. Next up, we have Orange Town, and yeah, kind of dookie, not gonna lie. I don't know what Oda was cooking here. How did you go from Romance Dawn to Orange Town? Now, I don't want to say Orange Town is bad, but it's kind of bad, okay? Like, Buggy as an antagonist is just not good. He's not a good antagonist, and the fight was way too goofy for my liking. I will say, though, it was the first arc in One Piece to make me cry. Yeah, I fucking cried over that dumb dog. So it has some merit there, and it introduces us to Nami. Get to learn about Shanks a bit. I think that was pretty cool, learning about his life so early on. But other than that, it just, yeah. So yeah, Orange Town D tier. Syrup Village. Okay, I think this arc gets way more shit than it deserves. I don't think it's the worst arc or anything. It's not a great arc. It's a serviceable arc. There are some annoying stuff like Zoro being cast aside for a majority of the fight, which was really annoying and stupid. Usopp was still kind of annoying, but we did get to sympathize with him well, in my opinion. But it had the first showcase of a fake out death, which will become a continuing trend going forward, which I really dislike. But yeah, Kuro as antagonist, I feel like he's way better than Buggy. So just because of that, I think Syrup Village is marginally better than Orange Town. And I did like the contrast between Kuro and Luffy, where Kuro is the second smartest man in East Blue, and Luffy is just fucking dumb. He's just a dumb monkey. And the way that the fight ended with a headbutt, it's kind of ironic. So I did like that, but his plan wasn't exactly mind-blowing or super smart. Also, there was a couple things that didn't make sense, like Luffy fucking surviving a blade to the head. Like, that shit was edged into his skull. He should be dead, like, straight up, but well, I mean, this is a fucking series where you could regrow your tooth drinking milk. So yeah, I guess I shouldn't expect more, but yeah, C tier arc in my opinion. Baratie. This arc is where One Piece really started to take off, and I'm pretty sure this is where most people got hooked into the story. So because of that, easy S tier. I don't even need to think about that one. Now, it's not SS tier. It's not the peak of the story, but it's definitely up there. Sanji and Zeph's relationship in flashback, fucking phenomenal. Sanji's relationship with Gin, phenomenal, man. Don Krieg as an antagonist, not so phenomenal, man. Kind of got overshadowed in his own arc. That's the only part I'm kind of iffy on, and the fight itself wasn't exactly that intriguing, but just seeing Luffy's integrity and how he gives no shits. The moment he punched through Don Krieg's Iron Spike shield, I'm like, bro, that's him. This guy is him, dude. That's still one of the most raw moments I've seen a shonen protagonist do. That shit was hard. So yeah, I don't think much else needs to be said. Baratie, amazing arc. Arlong Park, the peak of the East Blue Saga, or the pre-Grand Line section of One Piece. Now, if you didn't like One Piece by Baratie, which I don't know how that's possible, but if you did not like Baratie, I feel like this is the arc where you should decide if you actually want to continue with One Piece or not. Most people end up loving it, and that's for a good reason, because it's a good fucking arc. Now, is it better than Baratie? Yes, in my opinion. Though I do have issues with Arlong Park, which mainly comes down to the main fight. I feel like it was very silly and anticlimactic. So what do I mean by that? Well, we have Luffy here who just heard all of Nami's anguish and suffering. I mean, he didn't hear it. He saw it firsthand. He saw her break down and she asked for his help. So what does he do? He grabs the crew, grabs the gang, he goes straight to Arlong Park, busts in, punches Arlong across the face. Awesome sauce. That's super good stuff right there. But then after that, the fight kind of devolves into some silly, goofy charade. Like, Luffy doesn't take Arlong seriously at all. There's no sense of stake or tension. It's just so... He's just so whatever. It just feels like it doesn't matter, you know? Especially since Luffy does that stupid whirlwind move. Now, I can tolerate some level of goofiness, like Luffy using Arlong's teeth, for example. That was fine. Him pointing out his nose as the only difference between the human and fishman species. That was fine too. That was awesome. I didn't mind that at all. But it's stuff that actually drastically impacts the plot of the story that really puts a sour taste in my mouth. For example, like I mentioned, him planting his feet into the ground using that dumb whirlwind move, which left him vulnerable for Arlong to take advantage of, and he threw him in the water, and we all know what happened after that. It's just so dumb how he would, like, there's levels of stupidity, you know? There are levels of how stupid you can be in a fight. And that move just completely demolished any sense of seriousness that fight had. Now, it did get its momentum back towards the end of the fight, but at that point, most of the fight was already done, and Arlong just went down in one hit, which was really anticlimactic. Like, you'd think a fishman, someone so strong. I know Luffy is unbelievably strong too, but he just beat him in one hit. That's like, we get all this build up to Kaido, and then he just goes down in like 3 hits. You know, it just doesn't feel satisfying, and that's my main issue with the arc. However, I can look past all that because the writing and storytelling, the emotional storytelling I should say, was phenomenal. Like, Nami's story throughout this arc, it was just awesome. Also, all the other fights were great in my opinion. Sanji versus Kurobe, amazing. That underwater fight, very unique too. I really like that. Usopp versus Chu, a good showcase of his bravery, and he finally got some character development or progression, which was amazing. And we saw Zoro versus Hachi, just showing how strong and resilient Zoro is. It was just the main fight that was really disappointing in my opinion, which is unfortunate. But yeah, still, aside from that, S tier arc. Log Town, our final destination in the East Blue, and the place where Gold Roger was born and executed. The town and place of beginning and end. Right from the get-go, you get a special feel for this arc. Now, it's very short, and there's not much to it. There's no overarching story. But it was a nice little interlude before the whole journey on the Grand Line begins. And we get introduced to Dragon, which was really cool. And Smoker was a pretty decent antagonist during that time. For what it is, Logtown, it felt special, you know? Especially at the end when that whole OST is playing as they're cruising on the storm and they each, all the Straw Hats, say their dreams. That moment was real special. And at that moment, you know you're in for a ride. For something that's probably one in a lifetime. But I'm gonna give it a B. Simply because it's just... there's not much of a plot to it exactly. Luffy goes, he sees Gold Roger's execution stand. There's a whole thing with Buggy and Smoker, but there's not much else. But aside from that, it's still a pretty good small little interlude there. But yeah, Lockdown B. Reverso Mountain, Yama. So another very short arc. By virtue, I can't exactly place it that high, but it's definitely better in Orange Town simply because of how it retroactively makes Thriller Bark better. So, is it a C tier arc though? That's what I'm debating. I don't think it is, because there's not much of a plot to it again. They just kind of meet Laboon and Crocus, but it has like strong implications or foreshadowing for the future. So definitely has more substance than Orange Town, so I'm inclined to put it into C. I think, yeah. I don't think it's better than Steer Village though. Whiskey Peak. More like whiskey dog shit, bro. This shit is ass. This arc is fucking garbage. Oh boy. In fact, this arc is so bad, I'm gonna make another road just for it. Here we go. Whiskey dog shit. F tier. This arc is so bad. There is like no saving grace aside from Zoro handling those bounty hunters. And never mind the antagonist being like ass. Luffy's entire character was assassinated in this arc. Oh boy. Okay, so Zoro knocks out these bounty hunters, right? Luffy wakes up and he's upset. Naturally, it's fine, okay? Getting upset, I understand. But wanting to kill Zoro, The one thing Luffy's good at is being emotionally intelligent. Like, we literally had an arc where she didn't believe Nami stabbed Usopp. Yet, when it comes to Zoro, oh, you hurt these guys. I can't trust you. I can't trust you because you knocked them out. They fed us, so I guess you're the bad guy. I've got to kill you now. Like, dude, that shit. I'm getting mad just talking about it, bro. This arc is ass, dude. I never want to... Yeah, I just don't want to talk about this arc. Moving on. Little Garden, continuing on the trend of bad arcs. Now, is it egregiously bad? No, but it's pretty bad. Is it worse than Orange Town, though? Nah, I'd say Dory and Broggy are more interesting than anybody else in that arc. So I'm going to place it higher. But it's a D tier arc nonetheless, mainly because the antagonists are just not interesting at all. Miss Golden Week and Mr. 3, nah, not it. The fights, nah, not it. The Mr. Prince and Crocodile conversation was probably the best part in my opinion. But yeah, it just makes no sense in the world of power scaling either. Because if you think about it, the giant pirates, they're one of the most legendary pirate crews out there, right? And Dory and Broggy, they're the captains. Now, does it make sense in any context where Mr. 3 would be able to take down any one of them? Think, just any legendary pirate crew and Mr. 3 taking out their captains, much less like a good subordinate. It just makes no sense power scaling wise, especially since we know that they have access to Haki the Giants do. I don't care if it was by trickery, like Dory or Broggy taking down one another, that makes sense, but Mr. 3, he didn't just do that, okay? Like, he actually played a part in holding them down and shit. That made no sense. So yeah, the DT arc. Drum Island, okay. This is a bit of a weird one, because on one hand, you have such high peaks, like Luffy climbing the Drum Mountain, which is still one of the most underrated moments in the series, in my opinion. You also have Chopper's flashback, which was amazing, and one of the most emotionally resonant endings to an arc that I've experienced. But on the other hand, you have what goes on in present day during the arc, which revolves around Wapol. And Wapol is not an interesting antagonist at all. He's really annoying. There's really nothing to like about him, and he's not even menacing. Or he has no charisma. There's nothing good about him as a villain. So that really bogs it down for me, unfortunately. So it's hard to rank this. I'd say it's definitely, I wouldn't put it A tier on Romance Dawn's level. Would I? It's definitely high B, so I'll put it in front of Logtown. And then I might change it depending on the other arc placements, but I feel like this is where it belongs for now. Alabasta, or Arabasta, however which way you want to say it. The first real major fight for the Straw Hats on the Grand Line, the culmination of all the Grand Line arcs up until now, the first real big complex arc that Oda decided to write for the series. So safe to say there were a lot of expectations going into it. And he delivered. I think the side cast was phenomenal. You got Koza and the Revolution with his dad and Yuba. You got the Monarch with Pell, Chaka, King Cobra, and Vivi, which are still relevant today, by the way. And you got big implications for the future with the Poneglyphs and Pluton. Not to mention the antagonist cast itself with Baroque Works and Crocodile, which was an amazing antagonist. Now, he wasn't complex or anything, but I feel like he was one of the best portrayals of a non-complex villain that I've seen. The way he carried himself was just really good, and he was very charismatic, always one step ahead of our protagonist, and he's the first person not to give Luffy one major L, but 2 major L's in the exact same arc. So yeah, not to mention all the fights in this arc, Oda just delivered. I don't know what he was on. He was on that mink medicine, bro. He snapped on these fights. Not only was the choreography and paneling amazing, but they were just great stepping stones for the Straw Hats in a way to understand and learn about their characters better. And you also had great interactions where we learned about Ace for the first time, and Smoker comes in this arc, and there's a lot going on. So because of those factors, I'm not going to give it an SS because I feel like there was some fat that could have been trimmed down. But overall, it delivered. So high of S, top of S for now. I'll put it there. Let's see where the rest of the list goes. Oh yeah, and I forgot to mention that another reason it's not SS is because of the fake out deaths. There were quite a few in this arc. I feel like Koza getting shot a million times should have finished him off, but he survived somehow. Pell just survived the nuke for no reason. So yeah, because of those, that's why it's also not SS for me. So Jaya and Skypiea go hand in hand because Jaya is a setup arc for Skypiea essentially. And because of that, it's another very short arc, but it does a lot of things really well. Firstly, it sets up the foundation for the whole Mont Blanc Nolan flashback, which was amazing, leading off to the payoff at the end of Skypiea. But other than that, it's also the first arc where Luffy is really coming out of that underdog position and people are beginning to realize how much of a threat or how big he really is in the pirate world, or is becoming. And that's no more apparent than in the scene where the drunkard is looking through those bounty posters, sees Luffy's, and he just couldn't believe his eyes. And that all culminates with the final attack, I say final, but it's the only attack put on Bellamy that put him down, which is still one of the most satisfying moments in the series. Not to mention, we got introduced to the Blackbeard Pirates in this arc and got one of the most iconic scenes in shonen history. So because of those factors, I'm inclined to put it in A tier. High B, A tier. Yeah, somewhere there. I'll put it in A tier for now though. Skypiea is one of those arcs where you have to really peel back the skin and crack open the coconut to see the juices and meat and potatoes that lay within, because on the surface, there's not much going on for this arc. It's very isolated from the rest of the story, so much so that you can pretty much cut it out completely without changing really any of the plot of the manga. So because of that, I think it's a little tricky to rank, but I think the real merit of Skypiea comes in the form of its commentary on the overarching themes of the story and how it's pretty much like a foreshadowing parallel of what's to come later on. Now, of course, an arc can't just be good because of that. I feel like the sidecast in this arc was pretty mediocre at best. Conus as a heroine, probably the worst one out of any of the major arcs. The antagonist side, aside from Enel, the priests they were very silly, goofy, and nobody really cares about them, right? Gandalf was nice, I guess, and Isa and Wiper probably the highlight. But other than that, I feel like Kalgara and Nolan were just far more compelling characters. And they're from a flashback, and the flashback was amazing, don't get me wrong. But what's more important in my opinion is the things going on in the present. So I feel like we could have used much more work there. But yeah, it is what it is. I will say though, the comedy was top notch and the art and paneling in this arc, probably the best in Oda's career. So to rank it, oh yeah, I forgot to mention another reason I'm not placing it that high, fake out deaths. Oh boy. You know how much I hate fake out deaths. People were surviving millions of volts of lightning left, right, and center, bro. I don't think a single noteworthy person died this entire arc, and they were getting zapped all the time. So yeah, because of those factors, I can't say I like it more than Jaya, certainly not. So I would place it high B. Long ring, long land. I feel like everybody knows where I'm placing this. Okay, don't get me wrong. It's a fun arc. It's a fun read. However, it's completely unnecessary. We just came off of an arc that stalled the plot of the story, and then we have another, essentially what is a filler arc that doesn't drive forward the plot at all. So, because of that, I have to give it a D, man. I'm sorry. And now doing a complete 180, we have Water 7. You know it, I know it, we all know it. First SS tier of this list. The atmosphere building in Water 7, impeccable. The world building, amazing. The mystery, the intrigue, the reveals, the whole emotional narrative between Luffy and Usopp. Amazing stuff. Water 7, definitely the first SS tier arc here. And that really goes hand in hand with the follow-up arc, Enies Lobby. By the end of Enies Lobby, I knew I just found my new top 1. I wasn't certain before, but after that episode, man, I was bawling my eyes out. I was crying. Over what? Over what, you may ask? A ship! I was crying over a ship. How do you do that? Dude, Oda, from that day I became a certified One Piece dick rider. Amazing shit. The fights in Enies Lobby, phenomenal. Everything was amazing. Now, there were a couple things that maybe were kind of iffy at the time, like how the power-ups were handled. I feel like it could have been better, but knowing what we know now, the context we have now with hockey and Germa's scientification and everything, it makes a lot more sense. So in retrospect, it's fixed. Now, there were fake-out deaths in this arc too, which I didn't like, but other than that, it was a near-perfect arc with one of the most emotionally climactic showdowns or final fights I've seen in manga, period. Water 7, I honestly can't find anything wrong with it. Like, it's just peak. There's no other word to describe it. It just peak. And a large part of that is because of the atmosphere building, which is one of the most underrated aspects of the arc in my opinion. I don't think there's any other arc in the series, maybe aside from like a small section of Whole Cake Island, where Oda really spent some time building the atmosphere. For example, we hear about Aqua Laguna much beforehand in the arc, and tension slowly builds as we know it's approaching, and it really reflects the mood and atmosphere of the crew and the hardships that are going on during that time. But yeah, Enies Lobby and Water 7. Post Enies Lobby. Honestly, it feels a little weird placing these post arcs as arcs, because there's just no overarching story to it, you know, but if I'm gonna place it, I will place it. Honestly, it had great reveals. We learned about the Yonko system, we learned about Dragon being Luffy's dad, we saw Garp. We had a whole exchange between Aokiji and Robin, which was nice. Good old party vibes. We got the Sunny, Usopp apologizing, Frankie joining the crew. Honestly, it had a lot going on for the few short chapters that it was. So because of that, I'm going to place it high A. Even though there was no overarching story to it, it was still a great wrap up for the Water 7 saga. So high A tier, yeah. Thriller Bark had a lot of potential, but unfortunately it overstayed its welcome. Coming off of the highs of Enies Lobby and Water 7, there were expectations that this arc, while not as good as these, would still be pretty decent, but unfortunately, aside from Brook and his relationship to Laboon and the very end with Kuma, there wasn't much to this arc that was very good. The antagonists like Moria, sure, it was fine, but we saw the moment that Kuma arrived, he immediately overshadowed him just with his portrayal and hype and how interesting he was as a character. Moria was just more annoying than anything. So yeah, that kind of extended to all the antagonists too. The stuff with Shinji and Dr. Hogback and like Chopper's relationship with them, that was also a cool dynamic. But overall, if I would take everything into the arc into consideration, how interesting things were in the arc was very inconsistent, and when things were good, it was mostly silly good. Nothing was really ever taken seriously. For example, we have Sanji, who's always been a chivalrous person up until now, but with this arc, it really leaned more into his pervertness, which I really didn't like the direction for this character to take. So because of those factors, I'm gonna put Thriller Bark in high C. Sabaody Archipelago, probably the most consistently well-written arc in the series aside from Marineford. So long story short, this arc is peak. From start to finish, nothing short of incredible. You get introduced to the Celestial Dragons, which showcases the dark side of the government. And yes, there's been corruption in the world of One Piece before, but you could kind of just hand wave it away like the government, the higher ups, they didn't really know. They were spreading corruption on an individual basis. But here in Sabaody, that's not the case. The government is single-handedly allowing these heinous acts like slavery and auction trading to happen on the forefront, and nobody is doing anything about it. And there's really no excusing it because they know what's going on, but it's something that's just allowed to happen. So it really expanded the scope of how bad the government and corrupt they really are. But it also introduces us to discrimination and racism against the fishmen, which, much like real life, happens all the time. So I am really a sucker for these real life parallels and stuff like that. So I really love this arc and how it was basically a commentary of the evil in our own world. Aside from that, it had your typical shonen stuff. You had the introduction of the supernova, you had the introduction of Admiral Kizaru, you had Kuma and the pacifistas. There was just so much in this arc that there was to love, and obviously it ended up with a defeat for the Straw Hats, which was basically unheard of. Not a defeat for Luffy alone, it was an ultimate defeat. They were decimated, and it was just a very unique ending that ended on a low note, and that trend continues on for the Marineford saga, leading to Ace's death. So yeah, Sabaody, incredible arc. Also met Rayleigh, I forgot to mention that. Yeah, nothing else to say. This arc is amazing. I wouldn't put it, would I put it past Enies Lobby and Water 7 though? I think I still like Water 7's narrative more. And that kind of extends to Enies Lobby with that final fight. So I can't put it that high, but it's still SS, so yeah. Amazon Lily. Honestly, I don't have much to say about this arc. It's kind of a, it's a whatever arc, you know. Luffy just goes there, contemplates his situation, meets Hancock, gets things sorted out, learns about Ace's death, takes a side trip to Impel Down. It was kind of a middle of the road arc that was more so like comedy than really anything. So yeah, it was a whatever arc. I put it in C above Syrup Village. I think that looks right. Yeah. Impel Down was unfortunately set as the arc before Marineford, so it was kind of bogged down by the fact that there was a whole ass war going on in front of it. So people just wanted to get there, you know? But I'd say, like, overall, Impel Down was still a great arc. Now, I do have my issues with it, mainly stuff like level 6 prisoners, you know, there's nobody noteworthy down there except like 1 or 2 people, Crocodile for example. But like, if you look at all the level 6 prisoners, which this is supposed to be like the biggest prison in the world, the most dangerous prison, the one that holds all the most heinous people alive. But you go to level 6 and half of them, more than half of them, 90% of them are just fodder. And yes, I know Blackbeard came and took out a lot of them, but like that was like just a couple, that's like a handful, you know? Everyone else, they just looked like fodder, and it didn't really feel as if all the baddest people were in that prison. Like, it's not a major issue, it's more like a pet peeve more than anything. Because other than that, like, you had great cameos in this arc. All the levels had their own unique twist to them. Now, the antagonists, aside from Magellan, weren't all that. But Magellan served his role well, in my opinion. He was funny, and he was also extremely menacing. And you have Shiryu and all that, with Blackbeard versus Luffy. So yeah, it's a good arc. It's not top tier or anything. I also really loved Bon Clay's development here. It was amazing stuff. Him helping out Luffy, being there alongside him, Luffy taking yet another L, which you can't seem to stop taking in these arcs, but him overcoming that miracle. And the thing I loved about that is that there were actual repercussions to these effects that were saving his life. The adrenaline boosts, the life-saving boost, they all had repercussions. They took years off his life and they impeded his progress in the war. So I really loved how those helps came with consequences. So because of that, Impel Down was another great arc in my opinion. A tier, definitely. I believe it's A tier. Is it high A tier? I put it at the top of A tier, yeah. I don't think it's on Baratie or Lung Park level, but definitely amongst these ones, yeah. When I ask you the question, what's the best shonen war arc you've ever experienced? Who the fuck is actually gonna sit down, raise their hand, and say 4th grade Ninja War? No one. I guarantee you, nobody will be saying that. Nobody will be saying 1000 Year Blood War is the best. Nobody's saying that. You know why? Because Marineford exists, baby. All hands should be up, dicks should be out, because this is the shonen war arc. Now, I've heard that Kingdom maybe is better. I don't know. I haven't read Kingdom, but maybe it could surpass it. But as far as I know, the most iconic war arc of all time is Marineford, and it's for a good reason, because this arc slaps the shit out of all the other ones. It's fast paced, the paneling and art is beautiful, characters were actually used properly. It just had so many good things about it, and not to mention the fucking build up. The build up to this war arc, unlike anything I've ever read. They're gassing up all the characters, all these factions throughout the series that we've grown to know their power for, all coming head to head in this one bout. This war that will change history forever, and it did. And it wasn't just a war arc, because there was such good character writing in here with Garp and Ace's relationship with Whitebeard, the GOAT, bro. Whitebeard, in this short amount of screen time that he got, quickly became one of the best characters in the series. Oyaji, I just love this dude. He is such a good and amazingly well-written character. Ace's whole death and how it impacts Luffy and has to force him to grow. Blackbeard showing up, killing Whitebeard, taking his fruit. The first instance of a Devil Fruit user with 2 powers. Shanks coming and stopping the war. Akainu solidifying himself as a menace. Every single chapter of Marineford was monumental and completely changed our perception of the power scaling in the series. I don't think there was any other time where shonen was as hype as it was during Marineford, and that was all thanks to Oda's amazing world building, getting us to know these characters beforehand, getting us to have a gauge for where they lie in the strength of the One Piece world, all coming head to head, people we haven't even seen before but have heard of. It really was something else, and I really wish I was a weekly reader back then because the agendas must have been crazy, dude. But yeah, I just can't give enough praises to Marineford. Amazing work. Best of the best. Easy SS tier. I don't think anybody's gonna debate that. The GOAT War arc of all time. Enough said. Post-war holds a special place in my heart. And that's because it houses my favorite moment in the series. Still to this day, my #1 favorite moment in the series was during post-war. And I'm pretty sure everybody knows what moment I'm talking about. The moment after the flashback, where Luffy remembers how he failed Ace, how he failed his crew, how he failed to live up to their expectations as a captain. The moment he thinks about everything he lost. But in that moment, he had Jinbei. And Jinbei told him, the past is the past. You can't get back what you lost. But think about what you still have. That moment, that quote, stuck with me to this day. As Luffy counted up his fingers, remembered his crew, how he still has them, waiting, expecting his return, having their hopes in him. That moment was special. And I don't think we're gonna get a moment like that ever again. Now, the Great Terminal flashback isn't one of my favorites, not by a long shot. But just because of that one moment, I can't give it anything less than an S. And now it's time for post-time skip One Piece, the moment everybody's been waiting for because it has to do with the current events of the series. Now, I have a couple hot takes here that people are not going to be happy with, but it's my list, my rules, so yeah. Let's get on with it. Return to Sabaody. It's a return arc, so basically it's a meeting for all the Straw Hats getting together again, and it's just a hype showcase of their progress throughout the last 2 years of the training. So yeah, other than that, there's not a lot to it. Damaro Black and his whole gag with the fake Straw Hats was pretty funny. And I didn't really like the things what happened with Chopper, him not realizing who they really were. I get he's naive and he's like the youngest member of the crew, but come on. That was kind of stretching it. But other than that, you have that moment with Rayleigh looking like reminiscing about the past with Roger and their whole journey together. That was a really sweet moment. But yeah, all in all, it doesn't have an emotional through line or anything like that, but it's still a hype showcase. So yeah, I put it like high B or like low B, high C. I'll just put it here right now. I think that looks, well, actually I wouldn't put it over the emotional highs of Thriller Bark, so yeah, I'll put it there. That seems right. Fishman Island. Now I know this arc gets more shit and tomatoes thrown at it than when Concord officially launched, but you'd be surprised that I'm one of those people that thinks more highly of this arc. Now that's not to say I don't see its faults. Fishman Island has been an arc that's been built up since pre-time skip, Water 7, Enies Lobby, or even further back than that if you want to count since the introduction of the Fishmen, because you can infer that they've had a hometown and everything, so they probably have an island where they come from. So safe to say that created a lot of expectation for the arc because it's been built up for so long, and in a lot of aspects it didn't exactly deliver the way people were expecting. It was the first arc in the new world, so naturally I think it made sense for it to be a showcase of how far the Straw Hats have come. So for the Straw Hats to suffer any sort of loss or go through an extreme diff fight, I feel like it'd undermine the training they went through for those 2 years. So in that aspect, I was fine with it, but at the same time I could see how that breeds dissatisfaction because there were, again, a lot of expectations going into this arc. Now it has other faults too, like Sanji. I don't think I need to bring that up, everybody knows. Like, I like gags, but not when they change the course of the arc or the plot of the story, and Sanji's was one of them, which was really bad. The antagonists were also really shallow, but that was kind of the point, but I could again see why people were disappointed with that. Aside from Horty, I didn't really care about any of the other characters. They were kind of just whatever. And that kind of extends to the good guys too. I didn't really care about the princes or King Neptune all that much. There were a lot of characters that just felt wasted. But on the other hand, I think Fishman Island has one of the best execution of its themes. I'm always a sucker when it comes to discrimination and racism, but Fishman Island really put that to the front with the Otohime flashback, her trying to reprimand and establish a better connection with the humans because she knows that's what's best for the people of her country or island. and then them fighting back against it, but slowly they accept it. However, their hate, their discrimination towards the humans, and the long history that they have really put that to a halt with her assassination and reignited that flame of hate. And I just really loved how that went full circle, and now we see the fruits of her labor, like Saint Mjosgard. He was one of the people that helped us out in the Reverie, so it really hit home. I really loved that aspect of this arc. And especially the end where Jinbei gives his blood to Luffy and everything just comes full circle because our skin color doesn't define us. We all bleed the same red blood, and I just love that moment. All of that, and I didn't even mention Fisher Tiger, one of the best characters in the series, or one of the most underrated. I just loved how his story paralleled Otohime's, how they both wanted what was best for their people, but went about seeking justice in their own ways. Fisher Tiger knew that there were good and bad humans, and he really tried to let go of that hatred he held. But he went through so much trauma as a slave and saw how detestable and how evil humans could be that he just couldn't let go of that hatred. He saw the good humans too, like Koala, and how evil other humans could be to other humans. But because of what he went through, he just could not bring himself. He would rather die than accept humans just because of how extent of our evil is so large. And that just reflects a lot of real life, unfortunately. And I just really loved how they hammered that message home. Fisher Tiger is just one of the realest characters in One Piece. So because of that, Fishman Island, it's kind of hard for me to rate it. I definitely don't think it's as bad as people are saying, but I do see how they would think that, because it does leave a sour taste in your mouth in some aspects. So because of that, I don't think it's necessarily A tier. I put it high of B. Maybe it's controversial to say that it's better than Skypiea, but they're about equal, you know. I put it like, yeah, they're kind of interchangeable. I did like Enel more as a villain, so I guess I could. Yeah, I think that's right. That seems about right to me. Yeah. Punk Hazard. Right off the bat, I'm just gonna say this arc is not very good. Now, there are a couple of key reasons for that. I did like the lore of the island being the battleground for Akainu and Aokiji's fight. Law was a great show-off. I liked him here too. He was probably the best part. But there's a big problem when Virgo, one of your side antagonists, is used, or like he's treated as the main villain of the arc rather than your actual main villain, which is Caesar. He, like, much like his last name, he was pretty much a clown. Nobody took him seriously, or he was mostly jokes for the most part. But yeah, that's the part that kind of bugs me off, because he's treated as this joke, and then he takes everybody out and is treated, like, forced as an actual threat. And it didn't really feel like he was. It felt like Luffy could just take him out whenever he wanted. So it just felt really forced how Luffy was struggling here. So I didn't really like that aspect, and that kind of extends to the whole cast, like the Yeti Cool brothers taking out Zoro, like, seriously, come on. And then there's the whole body swapping thing, which was funny at first, but it was kind of, it just like felt like fan service, you know. So because of those factors, yeah, there was also the Chopper and the kids plotline, which could have been good, but there were no real consequences that come out of it. Like Mocha taking all those candies for like all the other kids, nothing really came out of that. So it just felt kind of pointless to have that whole drama for no reason. Yeah, and the arc just kind of overstayed its welcome, to be honest. So because of those factors, I don't think it's a shit arc or anything, but it's definitely not like B tier. Yeah, here seems about right. Yep. Dressrosa, by far the longest arc here, and because of that, there's quite a few things I like, but also quite a few things that I dislike, but the good outweighs the bad. I think personally that Dressrosa has the best case, or one of the best cases of character writing in One Piece. I think the flashbacks in this arc were phenomenal. Corazon and Law's flashbacks, still one of my favorite to date, but you don't even need to look that far. Just look at someone like Doflamingo's lackey, Senor Pink. He did not need that flashback, by the way. Like, there was no point. The only thing that it did was explain why he was wearing a baby costume. So Oda really did that just to flex, I guess. I don't know, but like because of that, he just made such a profound character for no reason. And then you look at all the other flashbacks. You have King Riku, you have Kuros, you have even Rebecca. Although I don't like her that much in present day in the series, I still think she has an amazing flashback. But then you look at the main guy himself, Doflamingo, such a profound and amazing character. He just has everything I'm looking for in a villain. Still the best antagonist in One Piece in my opinion. His flashback with Law, Corazon, and him, like his childhood, just phenomenal stuff across the board. I just love him so much. But other than that, if you look at the antagonist cast, like Diamante, the fat guy, Lauji, like I didn't like them all that much. Even Sugar, like they just didn't do a whole lot for me. So I felt like the antagonist cast, aside from Doflamingo himself, he kind of carried everything. Other things I didn't really like were the Tontada plotline. I did feel like it was kind of overblown and could have really helped the pacing of the arc if it was like cut out completely. I just felt like Oda had a lot more ideas for them that he wasn't able to execute because it would have drawn out the arc so much. Other than that, there's also Sabo. Don't get me wrong, I love him as a character, but his reintroduction felt contrived. I don't like Amnesia as a plot device in like 99% of cases, and this was one of them. Like seriously, the reason that he didn't establish any contact with Luffy, the reason he didn't go to Marineford to help him out, was because he lost his memories. Sure. And then he conveniently got it back when he saw Ace died. Wow, very convenient. I mean, not convenient at all. What am I saying? Yeah, it just felt so contrived, man. Like, you could have come up with way more creative ways to make him not come. So because of that, and him becoming Ace 2.0 essentially, it kind of puts salt on the wound, even though I don't have a big problem with that. So yeah, I didn't like those aspects, but other than that, I think the side cast with the whole Grand Fleet and everything, I think Oda did a great job establishing them. And then we're introduced to Fujitora, one of the best characters in the series. I just love how he's actively going against the system and trying to change things, following his own sense of justice and nobody else's, not giving two fucks about what anybody else says. So yeah, I just love Fujitora as a character. And I just really love the fights in this arc in general. We don't usually get tag teams or team-ups in this, but Law and Luffy taking on Doflamingo, love that shit. So yeah, Dressrosa overall, it's a really solid arc. I wouldn't put it on like SS tier. I don't think it's that level because of the inconsistencies and little things it has that I have issues with. But overall, I do think it's an S tier arc simply because the character writing is just so good in this arc. So yeah, I would put it right behind Alabasta or right in front. They're basically equal for me. Yeah, just because of the character work, I think I'll put Dressrosa in front, yeah. Now, Zou is very unique in that it's an arc that takes place as an aftermath arc, if you know what I mean. So, in all the other arcs prior to this one, the main source of conflict and the villains' actions coincided with the Straw Hats and what they're doing in present time. But that's not really the case with Zou. Everything has already happened, the destruction happened already, so it's basically like a what-if scenario if the Straw Hats didn't show up and save the day. And while I do really appreciate that aspect of it, the thing I love most about Zou is just how short and concise it is. Like, we get such good quality in such a short amount of chapters. It was just a much needed breath of fresh air coming off of Dressrosa, which was great, but very long. So yeah, I really did like how it was kind of a breather arc. But more than that, it was also very monumental because it just played such a big role in our advancement as a crew. Because this is the first arc where it really felt like the beginning of the end. The crew finally got answers on how to get to the final island, Raftel, and even got one of those pieces, which are the road poneglyphs. And we even established an army to fight one of the Yonko, raid their territory, and even take that. So it was just a big stepping stone in general for the crew, and because of that, it doesn't feel like filler or anything like that. We even got a lot of emotions, we got a lot of good setup, so Zou in general is just a very strong arc in all aspects. Because of that, yeah, I just think it's an S tier arc. Where though, I think it's like right down the middle in S tier. Whole Cake Island! Now, I did say at the beginning of this video that there were no biases. Yeah, okay, let me explain. I know there are a lot of issues with Whole Cake Island. There was some stuff that I didn't like. But also, Katakuri exists, so this arc is immediately an SS tier arc. I don't care what anybody says. My favorite character in the series, my favorite fight in the series, Luffy versus Katakuri, was just perfect for me. I loved everything about it. Yeah, I just don't Whole Cake Island SS tier. Yep, let's move on. But on a serious note, could Oda have done better with the Vince spokes, especially Sanji's brothers? Yes. Could he have done better with Carrot? Because other than that Sulong form at the end, she doesn't really do all that much or contribute to anything really. Yeah, he could have done better with that as well. Could he have reduced the wedding cake, Big Mom tantrum stuff? Definitely. But on the whole, what makes One Piece special? Well, at least to me, it's the connections Luffy has with the Straw Hats. And that's really put on the forefront here, because if you look at every other arc on SS tier, Marineford, it revolved around Luffy's connection with Ace. Water 7 revolved around Usopp and Luffy's turmoil and Robin leaving the crew, same with Enies Lobby. Sabaody, it was when the crew disbanded. All of this revolves around Luffy's connections to other people. And Whole Cake Island is the only arc in post-time skip where that is really brought back to the forefront. Because his connection with Sanji here was really special. I love their fight. I love the turmoil and the conflict that arose from Sanji's circumstances of being a prince and forced into a marriage, and Luffy having to deal with that and let him know that he's still going to be there for him no matter what, even if he detests him, even if he throws him away, as long as he wants to come back, as long as that's his real desire, because Luffy knows deep down that's what Sanji wants. As long as that's what he really wants, he will be there for him. So yeah, Whole Cake Island, I just love it a lot. What can I say? I know this is clear bias talking. So if Katakuri wasn't in the arc, if Katakuri didn't exist, then he'd be like, the arc would be like low S, high A type shit. But he exists, so yeah. Anyway, moving on to the Reverie. Reverie, more than any arc on this list, is the most you had to be there moment in One Piece's history, because the discussions going around during this time was unlike anything One Piece has ever experienced. The hype was through the roof, discussions, so much theories and discussions going on week after week, reveal after reveal, hype after hype. The era that Reverie was going on was magical, and I haven't seen any other series replicate something like this. It really was one of a kind. And by the end of it, our perception of the series completely changed with the introduction of Imu. I don't think a single person predicted his appearance or his existence in general. Everything we knew about the series, who was gonna be the final villain, Blackbeard, Shanks, I don't fucking know, Buggy. Like, nobody predicted that the final villain of One Piece, the Grand Master behind it all, was Imu. That moment was just completely mind-fucked me. Like, holy shit, Oda. It was during this arc where I became Oda's biggest angel, bro. Nobody was guzzling that dick more than me during this arc. So yeah, because of that and how unique the experience was in general, I just have to give it an SS tier. And now it's time to talk about Wano. Now, if you've been following my Twitter, you probably know where I stand on this already, because I give Wano a lot of shit, and that's because it disappointed me a lot. Now, is it as shit as I say it is on Twitter? No, I do think the arc does a lot of things really well, but it does have a lot of things that I didn't like, and I was pretty vocal about on my Twitter page, so yeah, follow me at SoulstormOP. But to sum it up, Wano just fails to deliver on a lot of promises. For one, the war on Onigashima, my biggest issue is that there is no tension in the arc. Now, what do I mean by that? I know people like to throw out the word tension without actually explaining what it is, but it's the feeling you have of consequence, a feeling of dread, a feeling that something will go wrong at any turn. But that's not really the case with Wano, because we can see that through the characters themselves. Look at Hyogoro. He says, the characters in story say, "I cannot imagine us losing." That is the definition of no tension. The characters in story feel no tension, so how are we expected as an audience to feel tension? This is also then extended to the main fight, Luffy versus Kaido, where Luffy, for most of the fight, he's all happy-go-lucky, he's enjoying his time, so it doesn't reflect the stakes that are at hand. Like, there's more tension in the Doflamingo fight, there's more tension in the Katakuri fight. Why? Because Luffy is taking that shit seriously. He knows it's life or death, he knows that so many things are on the line if he loses, but none of that is reflected in Wano, and it's made much worse by the abundance of fake-out deaths. Now, yes, there are deaths in Wano. Izo, that nobody cares about, he was basically a cardboard character, and Ashura, who died to a fucking bomb. Like, you can't expect me to believe these characters died when there's Kinemon, who survives a Conqueror's Club to the head. In what world did that shit make sense? And then you have Kiku coming back, you have Kanjuro coming back, you have Orochi repeatedly coming back. All of this just completely messes with our perception of how we're supposed to perceive the stakes in this arc. Now, there's a great video here that really delves into the stakes and consequences in Wano and why it doesn't really work well, which I will link down below, so definitely check that video out. It pretty much sums up exactly how I feel. But the abundance of things wrong with this arc don't end there, not by a long shot. I mentioned how much I hated Amnesia, right? Well, guess what? You got a whole ass Amnesia plotline in Wano, yes sir, with Big Mom. Man, that plotline was ass. You could have used that screen time to develop Killer and Kid. I'm so sad how they got sidelined throughout the whole arc. And then you have Kid in Onigashima that completely changes his mind on killing Kaido and taking him down, getting revenge or whatever because he wants to leave it to Luffy. Now that progression could have been good, but we skipped from step A to C. Like, you forgot the B part where you actually go through that and see that development. It was just really poorly handled in my opinion. And then you have other things like Ice Oni, garbage plotline, completely useless. You have the Chopper miracle drug that he took out of his ass. You have Zoro completely forgetting about Tonoyasu. You have Big Mom getting nerfed, not using advanced Conqueror's Haki. You have Law getting awakening out of nowhere. There's just so many bad things about the arc that I'm really disappointed by. And I don't even want to talk about Yamato. She's just a complete waste of space. Garbage ass character. I don't even want to talk about her. But of course, that doesn't mean everything in the arc was bad. I did love all of Act 1. I love the Oden flashback from beginning to end, delivering one of the most iconic moments in the series and one of the most memorable. Roger laughed. I did love what he did with the Smile Fruits. I loved what he did with Sanji's character, bringing his whole arc from Holy Cake Island to a close, getting him closure here. I did love those moments. But as a whole, Wano just had more things wrong with it than right, in my opinion. So because of that, I just can't rank it on SS tier. I can't rank it on S tier. I can't even rank it on A tier. So, oops. Yeah, not that bad. So yeah, let's see where it ranks. I don't like it more than Jaya. Do I like it more than Skypiea? I don't think so. Do I like it more than Fishman Island? Oh, I'm gonna get cooked for this, dude. I honestly loved the things, like the messages and how the things were executed in Fishman Island more, aside from the main antagonist cast. That's the only thing really holding it back. So yeah, I did like Kaido as a villain more. So just because of that, I guess it'll lie in middle of B tier essentially, yeah. And now we have reached the end of the tier list with Egghead. What an amazing way to end off this video, and what a great way to start off the final saga. I think Oda really outdid himself here. Now right off the bat, Egghead's writing style is way different from anything else before it, because we actually get to cut back and forth between the stuff going on in the island itself and the things going on in the outside world. Now Oda's done this too with Wano, but it was during interludes or during the acts, so he doesn't really spend an extended amount of time on the content there. But that's not the case with Egghead. We actually get to see these events, these conflicts play out, and I really just love that about this arc. It's definitely my favorite aspect of it, but the things going on in Egghead itself aren't bad by any means. The highlight obviously being the emotional through line of Kuma and Bonnie's backstory, which climaxed in one of the most cathartic punches in the series, even surpassing Luffy punching St. Charles for me. However, much like most arcs, Egghead was not perfect. Most of my issues are just annoyances, but I have 3 that stand out. Saturn, the Egghead incident, and the overuse of Gear 5. For Saturn, I just wish he had a bit more depth to him as a villain, because I think he played his role pretty well. I feel like getting to know more about him and his position and seeing what atrocities he committed directly instead of being told so would amplify the hatred that we as viewers have for him, and thereby making his defeat or death feel that much more satisfying. Show don't tell, right? One of the rules of storytelling. Because what we got from him, you know, well, he was honestly just like kind of a punching bag for most of this arc. The Egghead incident, on the other hand, was hyped up as this huge groundbreaking event. And it was, but just to the people of the story. We as readers weren't provided with anything that we didn't already know, and when we did get anything new, or like somewhat new, it wasn't exactly something that people, at least the devoted ones, haven't already theorized. Added to the fact that it was really drawn out, it just resulted in a bit of a letdown. And then we have Gear 5 Luffy. Don't get me wrong, I actually enjoyed every instance that this was used, like Gear 5, but they really weren't necessary. Over the course of this arc, he tapped into it like 3 or 4 times when it should have really just been once. He didn't need it against Lucci, nor did he need it against Kizaru. Like, we literally saw Luffy fight Kaido one-on-one in base form. Base form. The arc before this. So unless you mean to tell me that those two could do the same thing, it was not needed. The only real time it was necessary, the only real time, was against the Gorosei. So no complaints there. But the necessity isn't even the main issue. It's just that every time Gear 5 is used, we become conditioned to it. It just feels like his go-to form now, so that sense of anticipation and hype for seeing the form again is just gone, because it's not a rare occurrence anymore. Which kind of leads me to another issue, which was the clear lack of Advanced Conqueror's Haki usage. It was just really weird that Luffy throughout the course of this arc didn't use it a single time, especially against seemingly Yonko level opponents. Like, the whole point of his training and progression as a fighter that lets him stand one shoulder above the rest was this ability, but he just refused to use it for some reason? I don't know, it was just really bizarre. But anyway, I got a little sidetracked. All in all, I still think Egghead is definitely one of my favorite post-time skip arcs. Now on Twitter, I rated it an 8.5 out of 10, but I was just basing that off of how I felt at the time. I'm not going to backtrack on that as an overall rating, but looking at like everything here, it's all relative, right? So looking at it relative to the other arcs here, yeah, I think it's definitely more of a 9.5, and that means it's definitely an SS tier arc in my opinion. Now where exactly, I think it's like in between Sabaody and Reverie, yeah. And yeah, that's the list. So let's look everything over to make sure I won't want to change anything. Whole Cake Island, Marineford, Water 7, East Lobby, Sabaody, Egghead, Reverie, Dressrosa, Alabasta, Zoe, Arnold Park, Post 4. Honestly, I think I'm gonna move Logtown down one tier to C and put Thriller Bark over it. That seems more right to me. I'm actually gonna put it down here, yeah. And then Wano. Honestly, even with all its faults, I still think it has more going for it than Skypiea, even though I do really hate the stuff that's wrong with it. But I can't overlook the good things like Gear 5 and stuff like that, so just how important it is for the overall story in general. But yeah, looking through everything else, I think everything looks good. Yeah, that's a list. Is there anything here you guys disagree with? Let me know down in the comments below. If there's anything you'd like to change or you really hate my takes on, let me know. I'd love to discuss. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Subscribe if you're not subscribed. Like the video if you dislike it. Follow me on Twitter, and I will see you all in the next video. See ya.